Okay guys, as we finish up tutorial 5 here, we're doing session 5.3, which is over lookup fields and input masks. This is where we get into the enhancing our table design section of tutorial 5. Now that you've read the creating a lookup field section, let's go ahead and start with our first activity in this part of the tutorial, where we're going to change the invoice item ID field to a lookup field. And we will be going to our billing table to work to complete these 7 steps. So let's go ahead and click back into our database now and get started. Okay, with everything closed here and our navigation pane open, let's select the billing table and let's open that up in our design view. Alright, now that that's open, go ahead and close your navigation pane again so we have more viewing space. Okay, as you know, we want to use the Lookup Wizard field in Access to create a lookup field in a table. So let's go ahead and click on the data type box for our invoice item ID and scroll down here and select Lookup Wizard. Go ahead and click that. And you will see that you get this lovely little pop-up window here, which is just a warning message for an existing table relationship here in our database. Now this Lookup Wizard warning message here is instructing us to delete the relationship between the billing table and the invoice items tables if you want to make our invoice item ID field a lookup field. Now, Access will use the lookup field to form a one-to-many relationship between the tables anyway, so we don't need the relationship that previously existed between two tables. So go ahead and click OK on this. Now we can close this, and we're just going to go ahead and select No when we're asked here if we want to save the table design changes. Now let's click up here on our Database Tools tab. And let's go to the Relationship Groups, and we're going to click Relationships. Now we've got our Relationships window open. We're going to right-click the join line between the billing table and the invoice item here. And we're going to delete that join line. Click delete and select yes. Now let's go ahead and close our relationships table window. We go back to our ATEX and we see that we've completed those steps. Now we're going to go into the section to finish changing the invoice item ID field to a lookup field. So let's go ahead and complete those steps by going back to our billing table in design view. Go ahead and open up your navigation pane once again. And let's go to the billing table. And we're going to open that up in design view just so. And let's close our navigation pane as always. Let's go to our invoice item ID field. Click down to Lookup Wizard. And here's our first dialog box. Now this first dialog box lets us specify a list of allowed values for the invoice item ID field in a record in the billing table. Now we can specify a table or a query from which users select the value, or we can enter a new list of values. For our purposes, we want to use the invoice item ID values to come from the invoice item table. Let's go ahead and make sure that our option here is selected. I want the lookup field to get the values from another table or query. So that's selected. Let's go ahead next. Now we're going to click on tables, which is already selected for us, and we want invoice item. Let's go ahead and click next again. Now let's go ahead and select our lookup fields from the invoice item table. Let's go ahead and select all. Now all those fields have been moved to the selected fields box. Go ahead and click Next to display the next lookup dialog box, and this will let us choose a sort order for the box entries. Now we want our entries to appear in ascending invoice item order. So let's go ahead and click our arrow here, and let's select invoice item. Click the next button. Now right away you can notice something, and you guys know how I'm a stickler about best fit. So let's go ahead and make that best fit, and you can scroll down to see, make sure that everything is selected, and it looks like we have our best fit applied. Also here we don't see our invoice item ID field, so let's go ahead and uncheck here to display that. We'll scroll down just to make sure all that fits in there as well. Let's go ahead and click Next. Alright, here we need to select the field you want to store in the table. And we're going to go ahead and store the invoice item ID field in the billing table because it's the foreign key to the invoice item table. Let's go ahead and click on invoice item ID. It's already selected here. Let's click Next. Let's go ahead and just accept our default name here and click Finish. Let's go ahead and click Yes, and now we're saved. Let's go ahead and switch to the datasheet view, and we will be working with how to change the invoice item ID field value. Now that we switch back to our e-text, as you're following along, we are on AC 275. Here are the steps we're going to be completing. So let's switch back to our database here. And the first step we're going to do is go ahead and make sure that we resize our invoice item field here to best fit. So I'm going to switch to datasheet view here. Now we see that we actually have data here in our invoice item column, which I'm going to apply best fit. There we go. Now let's see how both those pieces of information were brought into our table here. So we'll go down to select our visit ID is 1552. We're going to go over to the invoice item box, click our arrow there, and you'll see how we have both the invoice item and the invoice item ID field values here from our table that we called invoice items. We're going to go ahead and change this. We want this to be pharmacy rather than office visit. So as we scroll through these, we see that pharmacy PRM 712 is available, so let's go ahead and select that. Next, let's go ahead and save and close our billing table. We're going to move into the next session, which is about using the input mask wizard for our phone field, and we will be using the table called patient. As you're following along in the e-text, you will see that we are on page 276, or AC 276, and we'll be completing these next several steps in our patient table. Alright, let's go ahead and open up our patient table in the design view and close our navigation pane. We're going to click the phone field. So let's click that and make that the active row that we want to work in. And let's go down here to the input mask section. Click our buttons there to open up our input mask wizard. Since our phone number is the input mask that's already selected, we're going to Click the far left side of the Try It box. And you can see that our placeholder values have been placed here. So if you go ahead and start putting some numbers in, you'll see that it automatically transitions as the input mask is created. So you don't have to put in the parentheses ourselves, and we don't have to put in the dash. So we've already tested one. You can test with the number that they give you, the 860-305-3985, just to see what we've already tried here. Let's go 860-305-3985. And it looks as expected. So let's go ahead and click the next button. Now we can change the input mask and placeholder characters, but we're just going to go ahead and accept all of our input masks from the wizard. So let's go ahead and click Finish. And as you can see, the wizard has created the phone number input mask for us, placing it here in the input mask box. At this point, you can compare your screen with figure 5-34 in our eText. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next section, which is to view and change the input mask for our phone field. Let's go ahead and save our changes we made, and let's switch our view back to the datasheet view. I just clicked save, but we'll go ahead, sure. And of course the best fit has not been applied, so we're going to go ahead and do that now, but you can see how the input mask has been applied to our phone field. Alright, now that we've seen our changes, let's go ahead and go back into our design view. I know our input mask has already been highlighted here. Let's go ahead and make some changes here. And we are going to input the mask box. We're going to put some backslashes in between. We're going to our hyphen. So let's go ahead and mark that as shown in our book. Since we made a change, you can see that the Property Update Options button has popped up. Go ahead and click that button. And we are going to select Update Input Mask everywhere phone is used. Because our patient form displays the phone field values from the patient's table, Access is going to automatically change the phone field's input mask property. So let's just go ahead and click Yes to apply those changes. Let's go ahead and save our table. And we are going to go ahead and switch back to our datasheet view. And we will once again resize our phone so that it's best fit. Alright, at this point, go ahead and read on your Identifying Object Dependency section, and we're going to jump over to the Open and Use the Objects Dependency pane. Here on page 282 and 283, we have all the steps we're going to be using to complete this next section on opening using the Object Dependencies pane. And you see those are the steps we have, so let's jump back into our table. And we'll pick on our first step. So we're going to click the Database Tools tab on the ribbon. We're going to go to the Relationships group here, and we are going to click Object Dependencies. Once you click that, you'll see information appears over here on the right. So I went ahead and dragged on the left edge to give me more room to view everything. Just a little bit more there. Let's go ahead and click on our patient form here. And you'll notice that our patient form opens up in Design View. All the fields in the form are fields from the patient table, which is why the form has an object dependency within the table. We're going to go ahead and switch to Form View. Now note here that the phone field value is displayed using the input mask that we just applied to the field in the patient table. So since we made the change there and there's a dependency, Access propagated this change from the table into the form. Let's go ahead and close our patient form, and we're going to open up the navigation pane. Let's see, go ahead and close this. Okay, we'll open up the navigation pane, and we are going to open up the visit table. Close our navigation pane again. Alright, now that we have the visit table open, let's go ahead and click the refresh button. And now you will notice that the object dependencies box is displaying the objects that depend on the visit table. So let's click on Objects that I depend on option. And then click the expand indicator. Okay, with objects that depend on me selected, we're going to click and expand the objects for the patients by name query. Or any of these just to see what the dependencies are. And you can see here we have a dependency right there. Let's go ahead and close the visit table. Yeah. Let's close the object dependencies box here. Let's close and save our patient table. Alright, next we're going to move on to the very next section, which is to create and test a field validation rule for the invoice amount field. And we are going to be using our billing table. Okay, you can see here that we are on page 284 and 285 for the next few steps that we're going to be completing for creating and testing a field validation rule. Let's go back to our database and open up our billing table in Design View. Okay, let's right click on our billing table, select Design View, go ahead and close our navigation pane. Let's make the invoice amount field our current row. And we want to make sure that we have a rule that will make sure that all the values entered in the invoice amount field are greater than 10. So we're going to use the greater than comparison operator in our validation rule box. So let's enter field properties pane here. Let's go down to validation rule. And we're just going to simply type greater than 10. Go ahead and press the tab key. Let's go ahead and put some validation text in here in the validation text box. We simply want to say the invoice amounts must be greater than 10. Let's go ahead and save our table design here. Alright, let's go ahead and switch to datasheet view. Let's go ahead and select the $100 invoice amount here in our first record. Let's select it, and we'll just put a 5 in here. Go ahead and hit the tab key, and you see that our validation rule worked. It says that invoice amounts must be greater than 10. Go ahead and hit OK. So now that we've tested and our rule works, let's just hit the escape key for the original value to come back to the invoice amount in that record. And there it is, the $100. Go ahead and close the billing table. Next, we will move on to creating and testing a table validation rule in our billing table. And you can see that we have the following steps to complete here. Let's go ahead and go back to our database and start working on these now. We're going to go ahead and open our billing table in Design View. Close our pane there. Let's go ahead and click on our property sheet button there so that we display our property sheet for this table. Alright, in our property sheet, let's click the validation rule. And we're going to type the information here in the book, which is insure. And we're going to select the tab key, and that will auto-select our insurance there. And you can see it auto-fills in. And we're going to type less than equal to invoice amount. Invoice amount. We'll go ahead, select that. Let's go ahead and close our property sheet so we can test. Let's save the table. Let's switch to data sheet view. Alright, let's go down to the insurance field here. Let's go ahead and change that value to $150 to test our rule. Go ahead and press the tab, and you can see that our validation rule popped up, where one or more values are prohibited by the validation rule. Enter a value that the expression for this field can accept. So let's go ahead and click OK. Now, as you notice, we just got a bunch of gibberish there because I skipped over the validation text that we should have put in. So let's go back into our design view. Hit escape so it'll put the original value back in. Now we'll go back in. Property sheet. Validation text. Close, I'll hit save. And we'll run my test again. So I'll go ahead and put 150 in here. Tab. Now, our validation rule window makes a little bit more sense. Insurance coverage cannot be larger than the invoice amount. Okay. Let's just go ahead and close the billing table now that we know that our change is correct. After it gets done being mad at me. There we go, hit escape and that'll put the original value back in again. Now close the table. Moving on to the next part here in the text on page 287, we are going to review the long text field in the visit table. And those steps are included on both 287 and 288. Let's go ahead and open our navigation pane. We're going to select the visit table. And we're going to open that up in our datasheet view. Let's go ahead and close our navigation pane again. And we are going to adjust our comments field. We'll just scroll down and look at information we have here. Yeah, it looks like we don't really need to adjust it any. Let's go ahead and scroll back on over here so that we can see our visit ID column. We're going to go ahead and select it. And we're going to use one of our shortcuts to select multiple columns or multiple fields at the same time. So we're going to hold the shift key down and we're going to click data visit. And that'll select what is in between the two that we've clicked on. Okay, now that we have our field selected there, let's go up to the Home tab in the Records group. And we are going to select the More button. Once we get that criteria to drop down, we are going to select the Freeze fields. Go ahead and click that. And you'll see as we move to our comments section, those three fields stay permanent. Alright, so let's go down to the comments box for record visit ID 1548, which 1548 is right there. Go to the comments here. We're going to press the F2 key and then release the Shift key. Once again, hold down the Shift key, press the F2 key, and then release the Shift key. And as you see, that was a shortcut to bring up the Zoom dialog box, which shows us all the contents for that field value. So go ahead and click OK to close the Zoom dialog box. Next, let's review the property settings of the long text field. As you're following along in your text, that is on page AC 289, as well as AC 290. So let's go ahead and jump in and do those steps now. And based on our first step, we are going to save our table and switch it to Design View. Go ahead and switch to Design View. There we go. Let's go ahead and select the Comments field name box here. Next, we're going to go down here to the Text Format section in our Field Properties pane. And you can see we have two options here, plain text and rich text. We already have rich text selected, so we don't need to make any changes here. Just click on our arrow and that will close it. Next step is to make sure that our append only value is set to no. We have yes and no here. No is selected, so let's go ahead and get out of that. Let's close our visit table. Go ahead and click yes. Next section we're going to move to is to designate a trusted folder. So let's go ahead and click onto that section in our book. Now remember that a trusted folder is a folder on a drive or network that you designate as trusted and where you place databases you know are safe. When you open up a database that's located in a trusted folder, Access treats it as safe and no longer displays a security warning. Here on page 291 in our text are the steps we're going to follow to create that trusted folder. Alright, let's go ahead and click File. Then we're going to click Options. We're going to click Trust Center. Next, let's choose the Trust Center settings box here. Next, we're going to select Trusted Locations. Next, we're going to click Add New Location. Now here you would just use the browser button to go to where all of your files are stored. Once you select those, you would go ahead and click OK and complete the steps. So whenever Access opens up a file or a database from that location, you're not going to get a warning if you trust it or not. So that's how you build the trust location in. At this point, you don't need to finish. You can complete it if you want on your own computer, just so you no longer see that Trust Center box pop up whenever you open up your database. Last thing you do is to back up, compact, repair your database, and send it in. So good job on all the work you guys put in, and that's it for our tutorial 5 for this week.